everybody, and welcome back to Finding Fashion. Today we're joined by Kristina Spencer, who is the Global Content Editor at 12 Storeez. Thanks so much for joining us, Kristina.
Of course, thanks so much for having me.
No, it's a pleasure to have you on. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do now?
Yeah, of course. So I'm the Global Content Editor at a fashion brand called 12 Storeez. It's a Russian fashion brand, but they are currently sort of expanding into the global market. And with that, they needed someone who could come in and understands the consumer abroad, but also understands, speaks Russian fluently and understands how the Russian company and consumer works, and sort of adjust content vectors and do all the social media and help them formulate a global voice as they are penetrating a very, very saturated market. And before that, I was a Condé Nast. I was an editorial coordinator at Contract Publishing, which unfortunately suffered from the global pandemic quite badly and is no longer a department at Condé Nast Britain. But that was very fun because we did a lot of content and a lot of branded content for corporate clients, from Baku to the Azerbaijan Ministry of Tourism to Swarovski to Deutsche Bank. So it was a lot of different projects where basically people would come to us and say, listen, you guys have the experience, you have the contacts, we need to create something that doesn't look like branded content for it to look pretty, so we can either give it to our clients or use it as a promo tool or use it as our communication strategy. And that was very interesting because you worked on everything from banks to fashion to jewelry. So that was always fascinating. And before that, I was in the business of fashion, where I got my first proper training. And that was a whirlwind of 6 months, very busy news desk, very small team, a lot of content pumped out all the time. But it was great to sort of, get properly tucked into it. I have been in the industry for, I think, about 5 years now. I originally studied economics and politics at McGill University in Canada, and then sort of realized that economics and politics are great dinner party conversations, but it was not something I wanted to do career-wise for the rest of my life. And I moved to Paris and studied luxury fashion business there. Lived there for 1.5 years. Loved it, but also have a bit of a love-hate relationship with France, well, with Paris specifically. And so I moved to London and I went to St. Martin's, where I did an MA in fashion journalism, which was sort of the reason why I am doing what I'm doing now. It was a great place to sort of gather everything that I have had developed so far, learn how to write properly, learn how to adjust your tone of voice depending on the publication. And it was a great launching pad for the rest of my, hopefully, long and successful career.
Well, you've got so much experience already. I can only imagine you'll go so far. So you mentioned there that you kind of studied in Canada and France and Florence as well. How did you find adapting to studying in different cities?
Well, so I'm Russian already, so I moved for the first time when I was 15. My parents live in Moscow still, and that was sort of a decision that my family made all together because we realized that, it's great to speak one language and it's great to have just that experience, but my parents really wanted me to speak English fluently and to experience a different world. And at the time, Canada really was that. So the original plunge was, I went in head first, and I think I was so obsessed with the idea of living in North America. The OC was huge. Golf was out. Everyone wanted Starbucks cups. Instagram didn't exist. It was such a different world. It makes me sound very old. I only went over to Canada in 2008. But I think that I've always just had this, thirst for knowledge and for new experiences. And I think I've just always come into everything being very open-minded. And that's the thing I've always said to everyone, that, you can't move to France and expect it to be Emily in Paris, because it's not going to be Emily in Paris. French people can be mean, not that mean. but don't come in with prejudice, don't come in with any stereotypes, and just be genuinely interested in people. And I think that's how adapting worked really well for me. And, I now have friends all over the world and connections that are very valuable throughout your life, personal and professional.
And how do you think that boosted your confidence? Because it must have been so daunting, to kind of chop around like different cities, but did it really help you when you entered the industry?
Definitely, because when you go to university in general, it's very scary because wherever you were before was comfortable and you have made your friends, etc. For university, you're so much more likely to leave home and go somewhere else, and it's petrifying. And now imagine doing that on top of the fact that I was in a different country. And when I got to McGill, there were so many people from Toronto and from Vancouver that moved with their circle type of thing. And there I was being like, okay, well, there are 3 people from my high school here, and other than that, I know no one. So it was definitely be just as nice and kind to everyone, and people will respond to that. And I think that, coming into the industry, which can be quite ruthless, in all honesty, depends on where you are and what you're after. I think that it definitely has, oh, so sorry. It has definitely given me that opportunity to just, walk into a room and know that, yes, there are probably people here who are, I don't know, Tim Blanks, for instance. And he is so much more experienced, so much more knowledgeable. But in the end of the day, he's also human. And as soon as you form a human connection with someone, everything else is sort of out of the window. And if it's not, and that's the thing that I've always found with the industry, is that those are not the people that I really want to be around.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been really interested in the gossip and in the, other things that can happen in fashion. But that's not to say that that's everyone who works in the industry. The majority of people are so nice and so kind and are just always there to help you out. And I think that as soon as you sort of go past that entry point, when you have just entered and everyone is on the same level and everyone wants to be a fashion assistant at Sunday Times style, and it's very, very cutthroat, even then, I have always benefited from just being kind to people and never sort of turning my nose up at anything. Because, if a stylist wants you to go and get a pair of tights, then you go and get a pair of tights. Mm-hmm. No matter who you are, what you are. I think that's the other thing that I've always been fascinated by, because I remember I spoke to Ruth Chapman once, and we were talking. I was interning at Show Studio, and she was there, and she was saying how when they started Matches Fashion, she was painting everything herself. She wasn't packing boxes, and she still will if she's asked to do it, if it helps the business, if it helps the project. And I think that's sort of the attitude that you should have.
Yeah, definitely. I think work hard and be nice to people is just a philosophy for life.
Definitely.
And you talked about the fact that you moved to Central St Martin's and you did a master's in fashion journalism. How different was studying for a degree compared to studying for a master's?
Oh my God, so different, because McGill, to be fair, is a very academic university, and it's all about, meeting your marks and being the top of the class, and it's very competitive and stuff like that. St. Martin's is also competitive, but I would say it's competitive in a very different way. It's competitive in when I got to St. Martin's, first of all, I was petrified on the first day because, I'm not that's so CSM on Instagram type of outfit wearer. And I just got there I think I thought really hard about it. And then I was like, I'm just going to wear a pair of jeans and a pair of Converse, and that's just it. And when you got there, you realize that people so don't care about that. And what they care about is you being a wealth of knowledge in your specific field that you are interested in or want to be interested in. And in that sense, I think St. Martin's was very competitive because you wanted to learn more, not because someone else was trying to outdo you in anything, but, someone could just recite sort of entirety of Richard Quinn's career, and you sat there being like, okay, well, I can't really do that, so I should probably go and read up, or what is the reference in this collection? Like, you know, what Tim Blanks, again, going back to him, what he does in his reviews for fashion shows, when he watches a collection walk on the catwalk, and then he goes, oh yes, so that's the 70s band called this, and they did that, and he places it all together, and you read it, you're like, wow, you're incredible. So in that sense, it was very different. And I think it was also very different because masters is you don't have to do it. I mean, I know that you don't have to do your undergrad degree either, but a lot of people choose to, as sort of, you know, that's the final step, and then I go and get a career, or, you know, start my own business or something. And with a master's degree, people really want to be there, I think, and they're all very dedicated. I mean, there wasn't a single lecture that I skipped, and I cannot say the same for my undergrad degree. And you just tried really hard. You wanted to do the best you can because it was a year program. And after that, you were out in the real world, which I personally tried to postpone as much as I could. But, you know, eventually I had to join the reality.
Such a shame.
I know.
You entered the reality in such an amazing way, and you know, you ended up interning at companies like the Times and the Evening Standard. How did those internships help set you up for your career?
I think so. I got the internships by literally, no one gave me any email addresses. I just got, I think I found the fashion assistant at the Sunday Times Style on Instagram. It was Clemmy at the time. And I emailed her and I said, listen, I'm at Tim Martin's. I really want to intern here. How do I do it, etc., etc. And she got back to me being like, okay, cool, come in for 2 weeks. And that was literally all I did. And I think it was definitely a reality check, because as someone who, I studied journalism, and it was, you were working on a fashion magazine, fashion supplement. And I realized that fashion assistant is not what I want to do, because I'm not a stylist and that's not my strength. I want to be writing, etc. But that internship led to the internship at the Evening Standard magazine, because at that point, Clemmy gave me an email of someone else, and I emailed her, whose name is Eniola. She's now at Vogue. She's one of the fashion assistants to Edward Enninful. And she took me in for another couple of months. And it was just sort of a snowball from there, because when you, and there were people on my course who turned up their noses and said, you know, I'm not doing that. I'm not spending 2 weeks in the fashion cupboard unpaid because I'm above that. And those people in the end haven't really gotten anywhere. You know, how many years has it been since my degree now? 2 or 3. And you know, it's just one of those things that unfortunately the industry still operates, and not, some of the practices are not great. I don't think unpaid internships should exist, but I think that if you have an opportunity to take them, you absolutely should, because if anything, it gives you a chance to understand what you like and what you don't like. Because some people on my program tried the fashion assistant or the fashion cupboard, loved it, and never looked back at writing. For me, it was exactly the opposite, and I really wanted to sit at the desk and call people and interview them, and you know, get that really juicy quote and write a good opening to my article with, and add some color into it, type of thing. So I think I would definitely recommend, if you can and if you can afford it, to take up those internships. Because they are stepping stones. And sometimes, you know, late at night, I can also have one of those mental, you know, not a mental breakdown, but a little wobble, let's put it that way. And sort of say, you know, am I getting anywhere in my life? And what have I achieved in my career? Because it's really easy to connect the dots when you're looking back. Well, when you're doing it, you're like, but I'm not going anywhere. But you never know who you're going to meet and where it's going to lead.
You never know who you're going to meet, and also you forget at how much you learn at each stage, that feeds
Okay.
into your career ultimately. Like, even if it's really, really simple things, like it all builds up to a really amazing skill set. I've got so many fond memories from internships, but you are totally right. I think you have to try different things to work out what you do and you don't like.
Absolutely, because also, there are 2 months, 2 weeks or a month or 2 months or whatever, and that gives you the chance to sort of experience a little bit of it. But also, it's not long enough that suddenly you're in a job and you're 6 months in and you realize that you really hate it, but you don't really know where else to pivot. With internships, it's all about pivoting, and I think that's a fantastic thing to do if you can.
Yeah, such good advice. So you went on to work at Condé Nast Britain, as you mentioned, and that publishes like Vogue, Tailor, GQ, Glamour and Love. How did it, because they're such prestigious titles and you worked on creating content for them, how did it feel to contribute to those kind of platforms?
It's quite incredible because when you think about the history and you think about some of the things that Condé Nast globally has done. I mean, one of the most recent things is Vogue Poland cover. I don't know if you've seen it, but they decided to give voice to women because Poland is currently going through the crisis with reproduction rights, and they dedicated most of the issue to women's reproduction rights and put a woman on the cover and did it all about that. And I think that fashion, my issue with people perceiving fashion has always been the fact that you tell someone you work in fashion, they go, "Oh, you're cute."
Yeah.
And it's like, actually, no, these people are a driving force of the society, and they can do so much good. They can also do so much harm, but it's pop culture at this point. Condé Nast, Vogue, these titles are pop culture, and they affect the way that we think. In a very basic way, going back to Devil Wears Prada, it is true that blue sweater that you have on has been decided by trend forecasting agencies, by buyers, by editors, by critics, and now whatever you're wearing, we were looking at a year and a half ago. And it's really silly, but clothes are ultimately a easiest way to express ourselves.
100%.
So whenever people turn around and say, "Oh, well, fashion, a bit frivolous, isn't it?" You go, "Well, it might be, but it's also global industry worth," I'm not going to butcher it because I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's billions.
Yeah.
It's billions of dollars, and I think it's really silly to disregard it. And contributing to a place like Condé Nast was absolutely incredible because you can see how the stuff that you do sort of disseminates through society, and how people pick up the magazines that you've produced or the books that you've contributed to. And it's quite a strange feeling to sort of see someone and to be like, "Oh yes, I've done that shoot."
You must feel so proud of the work that you've created. You like, such an incredible portfolio.
Yeah, definitely. But I think that actually importantly also, it doesn't matter if you are at Condé Nast or anywhere else. There are so many incredible independent magazines that get published, and I think that it really shouldn't be about the prestige of the title that you work for. It's about being actually proud of the work that you do. Because even at Condé Nast, like, I know of people who sort of sit there and they're copywriters and they don't really like what they do, but it's comfortable enough and they stay there because it's Condé Nast. You can get into a fashion party by saying that you work at Condé Nast. And I don't think that it's worth it in the long run. I think that in the end, even if you're working at an indie and you're doing the stuff that you really, really love doing and gets you out of bed every morning, that's awesome.
I think that's totally it. And I think so many skills are completely transferable. So, when I was interning, I always thought I did a lot of interning at, weekly magazines. And I thought there's so much, and they were small teams as well. And I learned so much by working for smaller publications, that actually when I went to different places, I could prove and I could show that the skills that I had learned.
Absolutely. I mean, an editorial meeting of a small publication, you actually have to come with quite a few ideas.
Mhm.
Bigger one, you can probably sit it out because, there's someone else next to you who produced five, and you're like, oh, well, next time. In a small, editorial scrum, zero chance you're sitting through without piping up once.
So after you worked there, you went on to work for Show Studio, which is the amazing platform that was launched by Nick Knight, the photographer. And they've, worked with John Galliano to Alexander McQueen and Kate Moss. Show Studio has been credited with really pushing the boundaries of, the fashion industry and how we communicate fashion. But what, in an industry that is, traditionally been seen as fairly closed, what value do you think there is in giving greater access to a bigger audience of the fashion industry?
Well, I think what Nick does is absolutely incredible because it again adds value to the industry that is frequently disregarded. If you watch any of the videos that he does, the interviews, or even the way that the panel gets together and discusses the, most recent Prada show, you see all of these people contribute incredible thoughts and, go off on tangents that you would never even think of. And I think the fact that it's education, and because these live streams, they go on YouTube and you can tune in and listen to whoever you want to listen to. It opens up people's minds. I remember one time my mother, who was very far from fashion, watched me rewatch one of McQueen's catwalks. And she looks at me and she goes, "What the hell are you watching? This is not fashion. Fashion is ridiculous." And then I sort of sat her down and explained exactly what, he was referencing and what it was and why, haute couture is not about wearability per se. It is art, and it is an expression of an artist, and that's why haute couture is so incredible and also incredibly expensive if you want to purchase it. And she got it because I think that through, lowering this window and opening the door into the fashion industry, people can actually understand that it is an industry that is creative, but it's also a business. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot less of this, oh, it's skirts and, puffy sleeves and whatever. You actually understand the process behind it. Mm-hmm. And with with what Nick does, it's also art. It's fashion and fashion photography and fashion videography shown in such a different way. And he's a brilliant and very, very clever man who you would never imagine that he is one of the world's best fashion photographers if you ever meet him. He's this very tall, lanky man who is so kind and so polite, constantly wearing suits. And I remember when I started there, he came in and I started as an intern, and he came in and he was like, "Hi, my name is Nick. Lovely to meet you. And what's your name?" And we just had a little chat for 10 minutes. He probably had Naomi Campbell on the phone, but he stopped by to, say hi and make sure that I was okay and comfortable. And I think it shows. I think it really shows in the entire operation.
You should never forget where you came from.
Exactly.
And you've contributed to so many different companies, like you mentioned earlier about Vogue Business and Vanity Fair and ID and the Business of Fashion. Obviously, they've all got completely different readerships. How do you tailor your tone of voice to suit these different readerships?
The 1 million question. Well, I think that if you're freelancing, for instance, you always have to know your audience. So, if you don't know what a publication is, read it. It sounds very stupid, but the amount of times I've spoken to editors before who say to me, I'm the editor of the Telegraph Travel, for instance, and someone sends me something that is so Mail on Sunday, mm-hmm. and haven't, and I can just see that they're blasting their entire contact list, and that's what you have to do all the time. You have to, adjust every single pitch that you send. You have to adjust your tone of voice, and the best way to do it is by reading it. So, Vanity Fair, it's tongue in cheek. It's always been bad. They've always done that. If you say a swear word on the page, your editor is probably not going to take it out unless it's just not, it doesn't make sense there. So, Vanity Fair is cheeky. Let's say Fabulous magazine, it's more of, real stories and real people, and they want you to go deeper in the access that you provide them, because, they are not going to be, Vanity Fair probably is not going to ask the person what age they are and what the name of their husband is. Fabulous Mag will, because that's what their readership wants. Their readership wants real stories, and their readership wants something that feels like it's a person next door. And if you're writing for trade magazines like Vogue Business and Business of Fashion, then it's just statistics, and it's a lot of numbers, and that comes, I think, from reading a lot of news.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way I would say that you can achieve that is by reading a lot. And I read a lot. I don't think I read a lot. Everyone around me thinks I read a lot. And I try to read fiction and nonfiction and magazines. And I follow, people on Twitter, even though I hate Twitter. I find it such a time waster. But, there are certain columnists that I always read. Claudia Winkleman, Eva Wiseman. These are the women that I just, absolutely adore. Dolly Alderton, brilliant writer, one of my favorites. And with reading all of these voices, you sort of figure out how to approach different kind of publications and how to change that voice. But also, I think what's important is a good editor goes a really long way. There are articles that I've submitted that came out looking very different. And that's fine, because the editor in the end sees the fact that you can write, you can interview, you can tell a story, but it just needs adjusting. And there are very few writers out there who do not get their work edited. A. Gill got his work edited. Tiny bit, but still. So, there's hope for all of us.
It's a really good skill to be able to nail, isn't it? Is that being able to take feedback and not taking it personally all the time, but actually respecting the view of somebody else and also inputting their knowledge into your work. So, my students all the time, they're getting feedback constantly at uni, but actually it's something that you experience throughout your career as well.
Yeah. There was my tutor on my Centre Smartness course. He turned around to us and said, we're going to do something called radical candor. And you cannot get offended by anything that I say. If there's something you completely disagree with because you believe that the story does not work unless, this sentence is there, I'm willing to listen. And I think that that's a great way of thinking about the entire idea of writing, because, there are articles that you have written and you have poured your heart and soul into them, and then the editor comes back and takes out your most brilliant sentence ever. And you're like, well, why? I spent 5 minutes thinking about which word to put second. And then you sort of just let go and you move on to the next thing, and then you look at the article again and read that sentence that wasn't put in, and you're like, oh, that was a bit crap, actually. So just, I think, detach yourself massively, because I'm currently sort of working on playing around with an idea of writing a fiction book. And I just know that it's going to be one of those things that I'm going to write and it's going to be my baby. And then if some poor editor picks it up somewhere, I'll never see that baby again. It will be a very different baby when it's gonna see light or see more people. So I think it's definitely, it's a skill that you pick up, and at first you do take it very personally, because you sort of think, oh my god, they hate me, they think I'm so bad, there's so many red edits. In the end, it's completely fine. That's what editors get paid for.
Yeah. And creating content for both editorial and commercial platforms and projects is, a huge part of, your career so far. Why do you think it's important to have an understanding of both of those industries?
Well, I think the reason really good branded content looks like editorial content.
Mm-hmm.
And to understand that once you've done it a couple of times, you sort of then start, around Black Friday when everyone's looking for deals and stuff, you go on, Vogue.com or whatever and read their best 7 creams for, sensitive skin. And you read through it and you're like, this is all a press release. Mm-hmm. These samples were sent and, this is just the way it works. But lots of people don't understand that. And I think that the reason why, just for your general life, it's a great thing to understand that you're reading something that is, not necessarily a real opinion, but more of an editorial direction of a publication. But I also think that branded content and editorial content, being able to do both is a fantastic skill for you to develop, because everyone is a multi-hyphenate these days. I'm a writer, come editor, come producer, come social media manager. And I think that more and more as the world of, the world of work changes, and God knows what's going to happen when we come out of this pandemic type of thing, people will want skills that you can apply to write both a branded post and an editorial post. And I think that it's very important to be able to do both, but also to do both seamlessly in the way that, as I said, again, branded content should never hit you in the face as branded content, but good branded content tells a story of something in such a cool way that you really want to finish reading it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great skill to try and develop.
Yeah, definitely. I think so many people, like maybe when I first started out, they said, you must specialize. But actually, as I went through my career, I found that I actually really enjoyed being able to lend my skills to different avenues, because that made me quite, powerful in the industry, I suppose. Not that I am powerful anyway, but, it meant that I could dip in and dip out of different industries and made myself quite useful, really.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's incredible. And I also, this whole idea of specializing, even if you look at some of the, New Yorker writers, for instance, and you see their career and they hopped from Forbes business desk to a different beat, to then covering governmental policies, to then covering style, to then covering jewelry. It's sort of this idea of the beat that you choose is there with you for the rest of your life. That's not true. I might be heavily in fashion, but I really enjoy writing about art. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoy talking to artists and writing about galleries and stuff. It's not something that I necessarily know a lot about, but I know how to write a good interview feature. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the most important skill.
Definitely. And also it must mean that you're always interested. So you're always writing about lots of different things, and they support each other, and you must never ever be bored because you're always talking about so many different avenues.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully I'm yet to interview, a mechanical engineer and just sort of tackle that, because that's going to be a really a lot of research. But not a single editor so far has approached me for such an article. So, I'm hopeful that it might stay that way. No, I think mechanical engineers are great, for the record. I don't think that I might be the right person to interview one.
No, me neither. So I feel you there. When you are writing for different clients, how important do you think it is to, use tone of voice to connect with your reader or your consumer?
Oh, I mean, I think it's probably the most important thing, because whenever I work with someone new who, I think I have an idea of, so these are not my clients, but let's just say that, Net-a-Porter and ASOS both came to me at the same time and said, we would like for you to come on as a copywriter. We want to hire you for this project for, let's say, Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day at ASOS and Net-a-Porter are going to be sold in very, very different ways.
Mhm.
One is going to be more sleek and, you know, elegant and sophisticated. The other one is going to be more approachable and friendly and tongue-in-cheek. And if you deliver the opposite copy to the opposite client, there's a very high chance that they're not going to be hiring you again.
Mhm.
And I think that, you know, in the end of the day, if you are a, let's say, e-commerce brand that is trying to differentiate from other people, you want to produce something else. You want people to come and do something else on your website except for shop the clothes. And this is what Matches do brilliantly. This is why Porter magazine was a success, because people were actually picking up their writing and reading it, and it was interesting. And it's the same with all of these brands and shops and department stores. They all have a very specific tone, and it's very important to follow it, because, you know, sometimes, of course, you can come in and say, I think actually you might want to take a slight change of direction, which is, for instance, what I'm doing right now with the company that I'm working with. But if they're a very established brand, you know, you're not going to roll into Selfridges and just say, hey, by the way, I think I know better than you and you should be writing this way. They'll probably turn around and say, next.
Content creation, as you mentioned, it is a relatively new space within the industry. How have you seen it grow throughout your career?
I think I think I might have to disagree with you here, because to me, content creation is sort of as old as the time, you know, as the universe, because, you know, as soon as the first books were published, that was content creation. Of course, we're talking about a different thing now, and we're talking about something that exactly what we just talked about. Trying to sell a lifestyle, a wholesome universe to someone else. You're not just flogging a skirt.
Mm-hmm.
You are giving people an opportunity to tap into the universe that you've created for them. You know, if it's Matches fashion, then you're probably cool and hip and probably urban, and you go for something a tiny bit more edgy than an Net-a-Porter customer would go to. And I think that content creation is a fascinating industry that will continue to grow, because, I mean, look at Instagram. They have just switched our entire interface around to introduce shop. And it still confuses me so much. I always click on the wrong button. And it's because, obviously, you know, as we become more and more globalized, if the world opens up more and more, you know, look at Singles Day in China. It was $75 billion that they made with Singles Day. When China continue, you know, and the Chinese customer is such a interesting customer, because they want so much more than the Western customer does, that all of these brands go and create WeChat and create separate things for them. And it's, you know, it's an entire region that most of the luxury brands create separate content for. Mm. And I think, you know, that's the sort of thing that cannot be left unnoticed. And it has definitely grown into, I don't even think we're at its fullest yet. I think it will continue. I personally think that, you know, with content, my prediction is that Spotify is going to continue producing podcasts and is going to sort of become the podcast territory, you know, with Kim Kardashian joining them and stuff like that. So and all of that is content. Mm-hmm. So many podcasts can be content, and that could be content creation. So there's so many avenues. Netflix is content. Mm-hmm. And I mean, look at the amount of content that content generates. Emily in Paris, boom, everyone talks about it. The Crown, boom, gives editors weeks of articles to be able to push online. Yeah. So I think that content creation is just something that's going to be so permanent for brands specifically, and the brands that aren't doing it are either not able to do it yet, or dismissing it as a not a valid sort of part of their omni-channel, and I think that it definitely should be a part of their omni-channel,
And
because people don't want to just buy clothes. People want to buy a story.
yeah, they want to buy into the experience now. And so many stores now, it's not, obviously the high street has massively changed over the last few years, and in particular, obviously, over the last few weeks. But, you know, people don't just want to go into a shop now just to buy a skirt. They, you know, they want to be immersed in, you know, that story, like you said, that a brand is telling, and
Exactly.
to connect with it, you know,
Yeah.
and content creation is how they do it.
Exactly. And I mean, you know, even if we go to, people don't want to buy just any pair of trousers now. They want to go and they want to buy a specific brand. And that's sort of, you know, that's a very old concept as well. But at the same time, you know, why is it that certain brands on Instagram blow up? And why is it that suddenly you see someone wearing a shrimp's coat and you're like, oh, I know exactly what she's wearing, and I want to be a part of that as well? Bottega, who wore, you know, fine, a whatever good luxury Italian luxury brand, suddenly everyone's wearing Bottega Veneta.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because they created content around their brand and they created a cool story. Phoebe Philo created a cool story. Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen, the coolest probably story, because they are so anonymous that everyone's obsessed with them. I was reading an article on Garage, I think, yesterday about the people who own the fan accounts about the Olsen sisters, and you know how they can dissect everything about them. And I just think that, you know, that's another thing, that there's so many brands now that you want to stand out, and there is a very high chance that your black skirt is very similar to someone else's black skirt. So if I have the disposable income to purchase that skirt, why am I buying it?
Mm-hmm.
Is it because you're sustainable, because that's important to me? Or is it because you're very it at the moment, because that's important to me? And this is what brands have to constantly think about.
Definitely. And your current role is global content editor at 12 Storeez, which you talked about, is a Russian fashion brand. And there you kind of direct the brands like tone of voice and social media, and their strategy as well. Like, what is the average week like in your job?
God, I mean, it's quite insane. So I do all the social media. So I plan the content, and then I direct the production team with the content that I need for them to shoot that week. We do a lot of video production, so I come up with video ideas. You know, I look at a lot of TikTok, which is not something that I've done before. I find references. I pick together, you know, I put together mood boards for shoots, and I come up with ideas of, you know, what is it? How do we make ourselves relevant right now? So, you know, for instance, right now, everyone's in lockdown. We can't be posting pictures of printed dresses at parties because people are going to look at it and go, well, cool, but I'm on my sofa in a pair of sweatpants that I haven't taken off in 3 weeks. So this does not relate to me. And then I am currently developing their Facebook page as well. So quite a bit of time goes into that. There's a lot of research involved with this, because you want to know what your competitors are doing. You want to figure out what other people have done, what worked and what hasn't. And then a lot of time is actually spent on conference calls, as dull as it is, but you have to sort of know what's happening in the company as wide as it goes, because my content is so dependent on the type of product that we have, or on the type of product that we need to sell, or in the type of product that we have a lot of stock of. So, you know, if one dress isn't selling, I have to think of why it's not selling through social media, because that's people's first point of entry into the brand, and what can be done and how I can show it. And do we need to show a closer up in the story, or do we need to do an entire shoot around that dress type of thing for it to be the main character? So there's a lot of that. There's copywriting, there is analysis as well, Excel sheets, which is something that, you know, I do like doing, but not that much. But it's very useful. Again, you know, you look sort of week on week, what changed, what tools you've introduced, and if maybe you haven't introduced any, how is that for the strategy at the moment and what needs adjusting and stuff. So it's numbers and content and ideas and lots of Google Meets.
Mm-hmm. And the website that you work for, is growing all the time, and the fashion industry is, notoriously competitive in the retail space. How do you use that digital strategy to expand your reach?
Well, I think that you have to always think about, again, your competitors and think about what differentiates you from them. So the brand I'm working for, they were founded in 2014, and they sort of founded them as an Instagram page, and they had a little showroom in a town in Russia. And now it has 1.2 million followers on Instagram and 30 shops across Russia, and 500 people working for them. So they grew massively, and I think that's a story worth telling, and that's a story that is valuable to the consumer elsewhere. So the fact that there isn't a physical brick and mortar shop anywhere in the world apart from Russia, you have to tell the story, the warmth, the openness, the transparency through your content, through the digital strategy. And you have to understand that, some people might be going for memes, for instance, as their content strategy. That's not us. So if that's not us, then what is it that we need to do? How do we attract people? How do we, create engagement in our posts? And it's all very interesting because it's not something that I really did before. I'm sort of an old school journalist, as old school as it can get when you're working mostly in digital. But with social media, it's fascinating because you can see very easily how your tools work. It's all there in likes and comments and reshares type of thing. So with that in mind, I think digital strategy is definitely such an important thing, because when someone doesn't have the opportunity to physically come into your universe, you have to bring that universe to them. And that's basically the small feat that I'm trying to achieve.
Well, you're obviously doing very well at it.
Thank you.
What do you think the biggest skills are that you've learned whilst working in content creation?
Versatility, I think, definitely very important, because you sort of go from writing about blue economy to the history of gemstones. So it's a thing that sort of keeps you very busy and very interested. And I think also time management, as silly as it is, the thing that I think lots of people don't realize when it comes to editorial or branded content is that you do spend a lot of time on emails. You chase people, you try to get people together in one place so you could, interview them or approve something, whatever. But that's a part of every job, and I don't want anyone to be discouraged by that when they start out. Devil Wears Prada is fiction. The Vogue floor at Vogue House did not look like that at all. And there's a lot of admin that needs to be done, and I think it's just resilience with that as well. And also probably the fact that I think I can now interview almost about anyone. I have spoken to some really strange people over the course of these however many years, 3-4 years. And I think the ultimate point is that people really like to talk about themselves. I mean, look at me. I spend an hour talking about myself. And as soon as you ask the right questions, everyone will open up, because in the end of the day, we're all human and we really like attention.
And what are you most excited about for the future of digital content?
I think I'm really excited to see how different mediums are going to marry into each other. I'm fascinated, for instance, with movies and how much more of a content it has become. And it's definitely digital content as well, because, we watch it on streaming services. I think fashion has sort of gone full circle from us being influenced by music videos to us being influenced by from the streets to us being influenced by movies again. You know, Sex Education came out, Euphoria came out, The Crown came out, and people started dressing in certain ways again. So I think I'm very curious to find out how more brands are going to tap into different mediums. Gucci is already doing it with their Gucci Fest, for instance, but I'm just curious to see what's more. And I think I just want to find more voices because, you know, there are the big guys, of course, who have been doing digital for a really long time. But what I've been seeing a lot, I think, even throughout the pandemic, is little things popping up here and there and voices being given to people who aren't usually on your typical platforms. Like, you know, Black Lives Matter. Suddenly there are so many more writers of color and writers from minority communities and, you know, LGBTQ writers and stuff like that. And it's incredible. And I think that's the beauty of digital space, that there's always going to be a big guy, but you shouldn't be worried that the big guy is going to always eat the little guy. And I think that's the thing that I'm really excited for as well.
Well, you're working in an amazing company and an amazing space, and I can only be too excited to what we're going to see from you in the future, and also digital content as well. Thank you so much for joining me today. Like, you've been like such an interesting person to talk to. So it's been absolutely amazing. So I really, really appreciate it.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for having me. And it's been a pleasure. As I said, an hour-long conversation about myself. So, you know, bask in my own glory now. But thank you. It's been great.
Thank you so much. And I'll catch up with you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Bye.